Thank you for attending today's webinar regarding the HRIS self-service site powered by ThinkWare's DNet. So this is what you can use as a manager or an employee to see all of your information that your HR provider, your PEO, your ASO, your payroll company is providing to you. So we'll be using this fictional company right here, HR Buzz. That's the HR Buzz company. It's a PEO or an ASO or a payroll provider that's supplying services to you. So the concept with logging in to see your information, basically the way it works is regardless if you're a manager or you're an individual employee or somebody going through onboarding, we want you to log in through the same site. So we have one login area where you'll put your user ID and password in the system, and based upon that user ID and password, it will take you to the appropriate level of information you're supposed to see. So when James logs into the system, he's logged in as a manager of a specific company, and he'll immediately get a dashboard of information that's appropriate to him. So here's James. He's logged into the system itself, and he gets the things that are important to him. So he gets some of his KPIs, his important dashboard information right here. He's heavily involved in both payroll, approving payrolls, approving PTO, and he's heavily involved in onboarding in this case. He has some I-9s to verify. So when he comes into the system, say for example he was approving a payroll, he can see the payroll he needs to approve versus the most recent payroll that was approved. You can see it's exactly the same, so I'll probably go ahead and approve it. He can click through and actually go in and approve any PTO requests that have come in online from any employees that James manages. From his KPIs right here, he can drag and drop and move these around so his favorites can be on top, and he can look at drill through and look at different information directly through these different KPIs, get rid of things if he doesn't want to see things in the system. But kind of working top down for what your managers actually see. You know, lots of times when a manager is actually logging into the system for whatever reason, one of the things they might be doing is reviewing employee information. So this kind of employee quick search is persistent throughout the system. So anytime this manager wants to actually search for an employee, you can type in a few letters and actually bring up that employee as if they were, using Google or something else. It's kind of intuitive as you're typing information in the system itself. So if I wanted to see more information about Melanie Rockford, I simply can choose Melanie, and it'll bring up Melanie's information right here on screen. We can expand and collapse. You'll notice the logos change as we expand and collapse. And these logos can either be your HR providers or they can be the customers. So this is James Winton. He works for this auto body shop, Harry's Side Running Boards. This could be his logos or it could be the HR provider's logos. So if James said, well, I want my employees log in at the employee level, I want them to see my logo, that branding can all be done. And then, like I said, you can expand and collapse these different things, which is important, especially since lots of times, people will be accessing this on mobile devices. So because we are using HTML5 and Telerik tools, we're very mobile friendly. So for example, if somebody had, signed in, say, on their iPhone or something like this, James signed in his iPhone, he has a very similar experience as that if he's using like Chrome on a desktop like I'm doing in this demo. And he can, once again, if he was approving PTO or approving payroll, do that right on his phone itself. So it renders it in a similar environment, doesn't need to learn a new experience based upon the fact that he's actually using a mobile device in that case. So back to kind of what James was doing in the first place, he's reviewing information about Melanie. So we can see her basic, department, division, assignment, can inactivate her, can see her picture, can see her basic information here, all of our payroll information, all our setup information consolidated here. Everything about benefits is set up here. Her HR information is all consolidated here. Under her summary, I can see things like maybe I want to see her total compensation statement. Maybe I'm a manager about to do an annual review of Melanie Rockford, and I want to see, well, what was her total compensation in 2016? And not only is it the easy number, that's easy. We know she made $56,000 in wages, but we want to see her total compensation, $67,000, because it includes everything such as her pay, of course, her employer-paid taxes, and also any employer-paid benefits and contributions. So we know that Melanie didn't just make $56,000. We can see her true hidden paycheck for her total compensation. And when we get to it, the employee level, Melanie, if she had signed in herself as an employee, she would see a similar thing. She would see a live total compensation statement. So she sees actually, kind of the hidden paycheck and maybe a little bit of an employee retention tool that lets, makes her a little bit more sticky to your company because she sees really the true value of her employment. Any documents associated with Melanie will be here, whether they came in from onboarding or post-onboarding. And of course, we can see every check that's ever been paid Melanie. And all of our grid views in DNet, in the HRIS self-service system, have these properties where I can do quick views. So if I wanted to see a quick view of this check, I can see her pay, employer contributions, employee deductions, taxes, or I can drill down to the detail. In this case, bringing up the actual check stub associated with this employee right here. So it gives a one-page information of everything about the employee, and I can drill down and see more information if I need to. Now back to documents, not only do we store it against the employee record, we also have a central library of documents that will contain any documents that your service provider is providing you or the employees you are providing to you or your employees, or that have come in from our benefits wizards or onboarding wizards, things like that. So for example, I go to the onboarding section, and I want to see every I-9. I can choose, type in, I-9. It'll pare down as I'm typing. If I want to look at Ashley Park's I-9, I can actually bring that up. Here's her 2017 I-9 signed on January 17th, both by her and her employer. So we store that document forever against that employee's record. So I can search by document, or if I wanted to search by an individual employee, I can start typing an employee's name, and I can see all the documents associated with this employee right here in the system. So it's easy for me to find and search these different documents, store all these different types of things. All the documents will live in the library forever in the system. Now, in addition to the total compensation statement, we also kind of have an employer side view, because basically what will happen is we have this total burden area. So it's nice to have the total compensation. You know that the entire employee hidden paycheck and all that information. But what you as an employer really want to know is how much is this employee costing me? So once again, kind of the wages number is pretty easy. We know, for example, here Bethany Gray, she's making $62,000 in the 2017 year for gross wages. Well, when I consider all our benefits, taxes, which includes things like worker comp, all our different taxes that you're paying, any fees associated with this employee, we can see this is the bottom line number about Bethany Gray. So James is allowed to see these employees, whatever employees in his department. He can see the total burden for Bethany Gray is $76,000. That's the bottom line number it costs me as an employer to have an employee that makes that amount of money in the system. And we have a bunch of other different areas where we can get more breakdowns of these numbers, but this is a good spot where you can see the bottom line number that an employee costs you as an employer in the system. So that's a little bit of the manager level. We'll spend more time here in just a second. The other thing about the system is there's a drop-down box over here. So when James signs in, he signs into, once again, he's a manager or maybe an owner of this auto body shop. If James was also a manager who happens to get a paycheck, he doesn't need a separate login to go look at himself as if he was an employee. He can simply choose his employee record, and now he sees himself as if he's an employee. So if he was just an employee and not a manager, this is the screen he would have started with. So when he comes in, he sees, once again, a dashboard of information. Most often what employees really care about are things like their paychecks and their PTO information. And so we can see all that information right there. If you're using our time and attendance system or our time clock, that'll appear right here. If you're not using it, or if that employee's not using it, it will not be here right here. And so, James can clock in and out right off this screen. He can come in and view his most recent paycheck stubs in the system. He can do things like, request PTO. So he can come in here and say, okay, I need a day off on March 16th in the system. It's going to be all day. What the start time, end time will be for that PTO in the system. If we need to put that in the system, you can put whatever. All that detail can be put in right here. And you can even put in a reason, And once he creates that instance of PTO, That email will go off to the manager, and the manager approves it. It'll flow through into the calendaring and into the payroll automatically. He'll get critical alerts such as, he's at open enrollment period, or if he wants to drill down into his detailed information, the same type of detailed information, depending upon what level of access you're giving him, he'll see just like we saw at the manager level. For example, he might be coming in to look at his total compensation statement just like we saw with Melanie. So he sees how much his total compensation is in the system. All the different breakdown of that information is right here. Okay, so that's a little bit of the employee level, a little bit of the client level. So back at the manager level, if you happen to be somebody that maybe you own a bunch of different businesses and each business is being serviced by your HR provider, you won't need a separate login for each one. James owns an auto body shop and he owns a wine shop. So kind of two different types of businesses. He does, since he owns both of them, he can actually just log in using one user ID and password and just jump back and forth between the two to see any of his information. So he doesn't need to remember a bunch of different user IDs and passwords just because he has separate companies. Now, other things that can be done in the system. Of course, payroll is right here. So any time entry can be done right on this screen. Can review existing time punches, can review expense requests. We even have options where check printing is available, multiple levels of timesheets approvals, and integration with hardware types. Time clocks is available in our system too. If I was using the time entry in the system, any existing timesheets I have will be out here in the system. I can look at old timesheets. I can create new timesheets. But here's my timesheet in the system. Whether it's 5 or 500 employees, it works very well. So if it was a larger timesheet and I wanted to find an individual employee, once again, I can start typing in and it'll immediately pare it down. This can be customized based upon whatever you want to use. Now, if you're using a time and attendance system, all this information flows in automatically. If you're submitting from a file, you just import the file directly into the system or you import it to the back office. Or I can type in hours right here. It just works like a spreadsheet. Now, you can customize it to however you want. You can add codes if you want to. So if you're paying a bonus or something or a commission or any of those types of things, you can add those on the fly. You can set the column orders around. So if you want to pay things on separate checks for whatever reason, you can. So if I came in here and said, I want my check number to be here because the bonus I'm paying Bethany, for cosmetic purposes, I want that $500 bonus to be on a separate check. I can do those on the fly. And then so once I submit this, it will go to the next person in the approval process. If you have nobody else that approves it, if once it's submitted, it goes off for payroll, that's all you need to do. If you have a payroll person that submits it and needs to go to some other manager or managers in your office before it's submitted to the back off to the PEO or ASO, then it'll go to them. They'll get an email. They'll know to approve this timesheet. So we support multiple levels of approval for your different timesheets in the system. Okay, so it's kind of submitting payroll, seeing the results of payroll. Once again, I can hot link that from the dashboard right here. If I'm type of customer that says I want to approve everything before it's done, I want to see the gross to net, I want to see the invoice, I want to see the check register, anything I potentially want to see, I can do that right here. So I can come in and see the results. I can see the invoice is going to look like. I can even come in and see a PDF of what the checks are going to look like. So I can see the results of the checks. So I can see all this information, either approve or decline a payroll before it's finished. So I can make sure that everything looks good based upon what I expect. If I wanted to review the results of completed payrolls, I can do that also from here. So this is the most recent payroll. It's a quick drill down. I, of course, can drill down through the menu structure if I wanted to. But from here, I can go in and take a look at, this is the most recent payroll. And in fact, every single payroll my providers run for me will be listed right here. I can break down any of these different categories. So I can see, my fees by employee. I can come in and see all the checks that are associated with this. If I ever needed to reprint a paycheck stub, I can do it right here. Once again, like we saw before, I can come in and, reprint, see quick views or see the paycheck stub itself, print it right off from here. And what's also nice about this is your reports aren't just limited to PDF standard reports. You can get your reports in file formats. So when you work with your provider and you say, these are the 10 reports I need, or these are the 20 reports I need with every payroll, you say maybe the check register. You can actually get this report in a format that's easily downloadable. So if I'm saying, okay, here's my check register, well, I want to do something else with it. Maybe I want to take it down to an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. I can choose Excel, and it'll take this information and bring it right down to an Excel spreadsheet that now I can manipulate however I want. It's Excel data, pretty nicely formatted. So all of your reports are available in standard PDFs as reports, and also in the ability to see them as files in the system itself. Okay, so that's kind of running, submitting payroll, approving payroll, and seeing the results of current and prior payrolls in the system. Now, kind of more from an HR perspective, we do have an integrated onboarding module in the system. Also, we have an optional integrated applicant tracking system. And so basically with the applicant tracking system, if you are using that, if you're utilizing that service, it's all single sign-on. So even though it's going to pop open a separate screen here, it's actually using the same credentials that I signed into the system with. If your company is involved in the Work Opportunity Tax Credit Program or the WOTC program, this system does support that. We'll let you know how much credit you get for hiring certain employees. It links with Craigslist, Indeed, Monster, all the common jobs boards. And if you post a job and you actually hire one of these employees that's listed for the job, you've gone through the whole interview process, say I actually hire an employee, everything about this employee will actually move into the onboarding module automatically. So onboarding can be kicked off either through the applicant tracking system, or it can be kicked off manually, basically saying, I'm going to add a new employee, either the employee sitting in my office, I'm going to put them in front of a kiosk and they're going to start typing their information in, or maybe the employee's at home. Today's Friday, the employee's not going to be in the office till Monday. I'm going to send them an email so that over the weekend they do their onboarding packet. So if I do it in that method, let's say I'm going to go ahead and onboard an employee that way. Before I do that, I want to show you just a little bit of the setup. Basically, in onboarding, you can have different workflows. Most commonly, you'll probably have one workflow per client or one workflow across your clients. But this client, just for example purposes, they hire 3 types of employees. And each type of employee might have a different workflow or a different process. So when I take a look at what that setup is, for example, this kind of generic new employee profile, these are all the possible steps. And you can add other steps on the fly if you need to any of your profiles. So these steps are what's going to be used, and we're deciding whether or not the manager's doing this or the employee's doing this, or both of you are looking at a step. And along the way, just the fact that we take care of the federal and state tax documents, the I-9, you'll have documents that are specific to your company. For example, I'm having them sign, of course, something like the handbook. So they're going to actually sign, the employee's going to sign the handbook when they get to the finalized page in the system. So going back to onboarding itself, if I was actually hiring an employee in the system, I would go into this, add new employee section. So depending upon how your organization is structured, the only thing we really need to know is, where is this employee going to work? So what department are they going to work in? And once they're hired, how much access will they have to their personalized site? Because once they're hired, we automatically create their own portal. So this employee will have their own portal, will see their paycheck stubs and all those different types of things. If you happen to know these other values, that's great, because these values will automatically roll into the system itself. They'll bring in default values that'll make your life easier as you're going through the onboarding process. So in this case, as I'm inviting this employee by email, once I've decided where this employee is working, I just fill out some basic information about this employee. So we're going to hire Bradley in this case. You might or might know his date of birth. We'll pretend we do, and we had that. We'll let Brad put his own SSN in, and then we're going to send an email off to Brad for him to actually go ahead and get his information in the system. So once he clicks continue, once you click continue as Brad's manager, you're taken to the first step of onboarding based upon your manager profile. So this could be 3 steps or it could be 15 steps. Just depends upon how many steps that you want to have. On the last page of the onboarding, you get to review everything you've done and everything your employee's done in the onboarding process. So we can fill out some basic information. We don't have to wait for Brad to start his process. we can go ahead and start putting in a few different items right here. Anything in red is required. You can add and remove fields, and you get to decide what fields are required. So once I, as Brad's manager, finish the first step in the workflow, it simply moves me to the second step and asks me a question. Based upon the type of employee you're hiring, these are usually the pay types that we give him, and we can come in and give him a pay rate, etc. So if I, put in his pay rate as, $20 an hour, it'll automatically fill everything out, and I can continue on. Now, anytime along this process, I can pause, click off anything that I do because it'll remember where I am. I have a process monitor that remembers this. So I might go back and have to approve a payroll or do something else. So in the meantime, as I'm distracted and doing other things, Brad might be kicking off his process. So Brad will get an email like this. Hey, Brad, welcome to the company. This will be branded and customized based on whatever verbiage you want, etc. So when Brad gets this email, he simply clicks this link and it'll open up this information on his screen. So, if he's just doing this on his phone, it's a nice, easy, clean-looking screen right here. He just needs to verify who he is. So he's Brad Bradley, puts in his email address, clicks verify, and now he gets to create his own user ID and password in the system. So it'll probably be the same user ID and password that he uses for, everything else in his life. So I'll put that there. I'll copy and paste it so I remember it later. And then password. And once he's done that, he logs in. He's got his own personal site, still with the HR company's branding right here. He's working for this auto body shop, Brad Bradley, and he's got these steps to fill out. So as he's going through this process, he puts in his SSN, he's going to put in his address, city, state, zip, etc. And anything else that you have set is required. If you want emergency contact, emergency phone to be required, those will be required fields. Once he clicks continue, it takes him from this first step to the second step. And this is where we start filling out those forms. Those forms we saw at the beginning that are being eventually going to be stored in the library and against Brad Bradley's record. So, in this case, we're starting with the W-4 form right here. So he can fill that out. Our system can either read from the PDF, so you can make a choice. You can either have fields like this be presented on a web form, and those will automatically fill out the PDF, or our system can actually read from the PDF itself. So if he chooses single two, that single two will actually flow back into the payroll system after he electronically signs this form. So once he signs the form, clicks to sign it, signs the form, verifies and signs that, we now have a completed document electronically signed by the employee, and it'll take him on to the next step in the process. In this case, filling out his tax form. It recognizes he's in Ohio, so it'll bring up the Ohio State tax form. So he just finishes the process. So that should give you kind of a good idea of kind of how onboarding works. It's just step by step walking through the different steps. The last thing will be finalizing everything, and then he'll be an employee in the system, assuming you guys approve the employee. Okay, so that's a little bit of onboarding. Now, related to onboarding, of course, is benefit enrollment. So benefit enrollment, obviously benefit enrollment can either be new hire enrollment, like Brad Bradley would eventually go through, current open enrollment, for if you have 1,000 employees going through open enrollment, or a life event change. The wizard is essentially the same regardless of what type of enrollment they're going through. All the rules and the eligibility have already been set up in the system, so the employees presented a pretty clean and easy to use screen, and they're reminded about when it's time to go through any of these things. So for example, they'll get a notification similar to this, can be customized. Say, James, you're eligible for benefits as of March 8th. Here's a little bit of information, and this will be customized. It'll be your Buzz HR, your Harry Side Running Boards team portal, whatever it is. And so he'll click that link, and it'll open up his system ready for, he signs in, and he can go ahead and go through his open enrollment. So James gets that email, goes through his login, puts his user ID and password into the system itself, logs in, and then he'll be able to go through open enrollment. So James is a manager, so he actually wants to do this as an employee because it's his own open enrollment. So he jumps over to his employee level, and he's reminded, hey, open enrollment is available. Let's go ahead and get this done. So once he's signed into this point, he's looking at his open enrollment wizard. He's been in before, so he's partially completed. So he clicks Continue Open Enrollment. All of these verbiage on these screens and the data that you collect can be customized, but it's 4 simple steps. The Get Started page, putting in the dependents, choosing the different plans, and then signing any documents. So it begins the open enrollment. We like for him to put his dependents in first, because if he does that, then he doesn't have to keep typing in new dependents every time he's choosing, a health, a dental, a life, STD, LTD, vision. If he needs to put any dependents or beneficiaries in any of those different plans, he can just choose from his library of dependents he's already put in the system. Once he clicks Next, then it takes him to his different plan choices. So he's got 4 different plan types. There can be dependencies, things like he can't choose a HSA unless he has a high deductible health, things like that. He can't choose supplemental life unless he has life. All those dependencies will be set up based upon whatever rules you have with your plans. So as he's looking at his different plan types, if he wants to see the actual plans, this will list any plans that he's eligible for. And he can expand and collapse the ones he doesn't care about. So when he's doing comparison, he can actually compare how much the different plans will cost him. So as he's choosing different levels, those will automatically change, including the premiums, the per check amounts, and how much you as an employer is contributing. The plan details are here, and even more expanded plan details. This can have any verbiage description you want. It can be links to third-party provider websites, and there can even be PDF documents like the statement of benefits. All those things could be attached here. And then once he chooses the plan, that plan type he chooses in this case requires a beneficiary, so Susan Winton is the beneficiary. He's done with that plan. So similar to onboarding, he just walks through the different plans and then he signs the documents just like we saw with the W-4 before. So, and then it all flows into payroll based upon the end date of the open enrollment in the system. The open enrollment stays open for him as long as the open enrollment period date range is open for him. So that's kind of onboarding. That's kind of how the benefit enrollment works, kind of overviews of how those 2 things work. So really the next part I'll show is kind of more related to reporting in the system. So first of all, reporting is always a big request. Everybody wants every type of report in the world. So we try to accommodate the needs of the end user who doesn't necessarily have a lot of technical skills to the type of people that really like to get in and dig and create their own reports and report writer and things like that. So first of all, we like to think of ourselves as a little bit of a post-reporting world in the sense that you get a lot of information on your dashboards right here. So things, critical items will be listed on your dashboards, business intelligence. And not only is that going to be available to you based upon your dashboard information, but you also have the option to have that pushed to you. So you saw that kind of with, the fact that we're pushing information to your employees, whether they're benefit effective dates, if they're paycheck notifications, things like that. But they can also be kind of more HR type driven notifications. You might have things like you say, I want to know 30 days out if an employee's license is about to expire. Or I have a training coming up. So I can look, I can go to my training area and I say, oh, I've got a training coming up. Well, I can also say, well, let's go ahead and automatically notify this employee their annual training's coming up, and they might have a report attached to it or a form they need to fill out. Things like happy birthdays can be sent out to individual employees, or a review, or anything like that. Or even consolidated reporting information. I can see who's actually punched in. I can have that delivered to me daily or something like that. So not only do we have this business intelligence or kind of post-reporting from a dashboard perspective, we can also push it out to you either based upon a schedule or a qualifying event, like a training's coming up in 30 days. So beyond that, we also provide more advanced dashboards. And this is through our insight. So kind of the top level dashboard is right here. This is kind of that type of info, the bottom line type of information about my company. I might say, I want to know from June of 2014 to current month, show me my total employer burden. And maybe I want to know when I'm a seasonal type business, I want to see when I have spikes of those things. I want to see an overview of my company during this time. And as I move my slider or change my date ranges, all these things recalculate. See gross wages, employer cost, total burden, total number of checks, my employee turnover percentage and retention rate. And I can see it at these top level numbers, or I can come in and break it down into much more detailed levels. So this dashboard can get very granular if you want. Now we also, of course, have traditional reporting. Now traditional reporting, you saw that from before, kind of how we see results of payroll. We can dump it to Excel and those things. In addition, all of our kind of list areas in the system, for example, an employee list, we can basically use these as starting points for building reports too. So if I'm looking at this, this is just a list of the employees I'm allowed to see information about. So I might say, well, the picture's taking up too much space. I'm going to go ahead and remove that column. I can do filters. I can drag and drop and sort this by department. And maybe this is my starting point, and I want to take this down to Excel. I can actually take, so any of these grids that I create in the system and I manipulate, I can come down and I can go and dump it down directly into an Excel spreadsheet in the system. So now I've got an Excel spreadsheet right here, and I can do whatever else I want with it. So the grids and the native reporting is all there. And of course we have the reporting center. And we kind of got 4 different categories of reports here, beyond just the standard reports we've seen. The quick lists are kind of the easy button push reports, where I can come in and say, okay, I just want to see, a list of my birth dates. Come in here and here's everybody's having a birth date in January, everybody's having a birth date in May. So I can see all that information just by pushing the button. We're constantly adding these things, but they're kind of the easy push button reports dumped down to Excel. The report center, different categories of reports that you can run across different date ranges and things like that. For example, you might be running a payroll labor distribution report, that you get with every payroll, but you might say, well, I want to see it monthly, or I want to see it across the lifetime that I've been with this company. So you can just choose date ranges and things like that and run these reports that way. These are the same types of reports you're getting with payroll, you can actually run across different ranges. The report writer lets you build your own screens and reports in the system. So this is where you can come in as a user and say, okay, I want to build my own graphs, my own reports, and I want to do it once, and then I can save that. The data is yours, so you can build this however you want. So it's a slightly more technical tool, but still pretty easy to use. For example, if I start saying, okay, I want to build a report based upon this data, the table linking is done for me. I just simply check off the boxes, and it'll link the appropriate tables. So say, for example, I'm building a wage graph, so I can see, for all the different months, in every month over month that I've been with this company, I want to see when I have spikes in wages or something like that. So I can add my fields here. I can say, okay, I want to do check date and gross wages. I'm going to do last name, first name, the department the employee's in. So those are the fields I want for whatever reason. I click OK. Gives me the list of fields. I can keep adding more if I wanted to, but it's drag and drop. So if I want a last name next to first name, I can do that. And I click Preview, and it gives me basically a list of data. It's almost a file at this point. It's still a report, but really I could dump this down to Excel. It's really a data file. I can do summaries for subtotals and things like that. But if all I wanted for this was just a chart, just something I can visually see this, it'll always be live updated every time I go into it. It's very easy to add charts to these things. I can say, show me a trend chart, and I want to see, let's base it on gross wages, and let's do an average of gross wages. So once I've done that, and I preview this, now I can see this chart right here. So I can see every December, it seems like my average of wages is a little bit spiked, while it's spiked down in March. There's some sort of seasonality component involved in my company. It's causing this. So, if I've been with the client, if I've been with this HR company for 10 years, this is an average over 10 years of what my wages look like month over month. Now I can save this and say, average wages month over month, and I never have to go through those steps again. I can come in here anytime, and I can see the same information. It'll always be live updated. I've created my own screen in the system. So you can create as many of these screens as you want. If I wanted somebody else to see this, I can send them an email with this information, or I can take this to Excel or Word or just even print it off as a report. So this is now a permanent part of my HRIS experience. Okay, and kind of the last thing I'll show in the reporting section right here is this concept of export solutions. And so what export solutions is the ability to create custom files for things like importing into your own accounting system. So, for example, you might store your own general ledger transaction your general ledger numbers here in the system, and you're going to do some different types of breakouts for these things. So you can store and maintain your own GL account numbers in this system. So when your provider is running payroll and doing those types of things, you can dump this information down to an Excel or a CSV or a TXT file, and manipulate it and import it into your own accounting system. So you can have this data live. You can access it whenever you want to. Make your life a lot easier from the accounting perspective. There's a lot more this system can do, but that should give you some good highlights. Contact us for more questions if you have any questions about this, and thank you for your time.